Welcome back. I'm Selena Thompson. For this week's episode, I have just changed it now on the spot because I realized that everything I'd kind of made notes about, there's just so much I want to cover. And it's the afternoon. My brain is really not braining at full capacity. And I'm telling you all this because this is actually the life that we live. And I've always wanted to be as transparent and authentic as much as possible in terms of putting neurodivergent on display and the everyday life that we live. So anyway, I'd written down 10 points and I just looked at it and I'm like, I just took all the brain power out of me to think of the 10 points. And, we can only work when there's an impending deadline. So yeah, I could have done this earlier, but it wouldn't have been the same. It would have hit diff. So what I was originally going to talk about was some lessons that I learned the hard way over the past year. And that was realizing that it's coming up to a year of when I started this podcast, which for anyone that has known me most of my life, or even as a child, or even maybe like up into 3 years ago, that version of Selena could never, ever, ever have done this, ever. And it's a really big thing for me. And it just got me thinking about how far I've come and where I was a year ago. I'd started at living out of an Airbnb, freshly separated, just like in the absolute ground zero emotional rubble of, you know, coming out of marriage with kids. And if anyone's been through it, they will know what I'm talking about. And if you don't, thank God you don't. But anyway, I'm just saying that I just can't believe where I was a year ago starting this to where I am now. And why I was thinking about this also is because I had caught up with a few friends recently that I don't really see all the time because that's ADHD, but one that I hadn't seen since last year, so like 6 months ago, I think was just kind of blown away by how different I am, or just my insights and my growth and like healing. I hate that word, but I really don't know another word to call it. Recovering, thriving, not surviving, really. And yeah, you really stop and think just how much you have grown and developed as a character and how cooked you are now. You're not undercooked. You've had a lot of character development happen in your life. And it really only happens from the bad stuff, right? Even though we hate it at the time and we don't think we're ever going to get through it. Um, but anyway, I kept journals and I still do, but I've dug some of mine out. I think I've got like 4. There's just a lot that goes on in my head. And I was reading some of them and just reading it, I don't even know that version of me. And I actually don't even remember feeling this low. And that's the beauty of trauma, isn't it? um, when you get to a point that your memory just starts getting foggier and foggier, and then it just wipes it clean, because otherwise you really wouldn't survive, would you, mentally? So I'm just so grateful, and I'm so just damn proud of myself, and I'm not afraid to say it. And I think that anyone else that has been through similar things, or even just really upturning life events, should just actually just stop and be delusionally proud of yourself and in love with yourself for how much you have grown or how much you've overcome. And it's a lot of the time without someone else's help, or without people's help, especially who you thought would be there for you. So in saying that, I went over some lessons and just some of my insights that I seem to share out like I'm, a Buddha these days, and they help people. But it's very involved. And as I said, it's the afternoon. I spent way too long effing around, as I do. So I just thought I was actually going to take out a couple of those points and just focus on it as a topic, because it is such a big topic and it's something that isn't really talked about as much. And I know that just through a lot of the people that I talk to on my Instagram page or even on TikTok, we're all like saying the same thing, but we just know we can't say it out loud because it sounds like crazy. And hey, we've been called crazy enough times in our life. Why do we need more of it? And that really is intuition. I just was going to talk about ADHD and intuition and my experiences. I'm not going to talk about my friends' experiences because that is their things to gatekeep. And I'm always so privileged, just side note, when I get told, the most insane or tragic or amazing stories from people that I've never met online. And they trust me enough with sharing these stories. And so it's a privilege and it's an honor, and I don't pass that on. And also, low key, I forget quite a lot of it. So we don't listen and we don't judge. So anyway, intuition. We've all got it right. I mean, I know we all have it, but unless you are neurodivergent, you'll not understand the level of intuition that we have, right? And I don't know about you, but ever since I was a little kid, I could always like sense things. And look, there's lots of theories behind why we have heightened intuition. That's not really the point that that I'm trying to get into, because everyone can have a theory about whether it's come from trauma. Now you've got hypervigilance, or you're just from another planet, like I like to say, or you just have heightened senses because you've been rejected a lot. I mean, there's so many things that can go about how we have or why we have heightened senses. But to me, it doesn't really matter because it's still there. So anyway, back to it. I know that I've always had intuition. I know that I've always been sensitive, right? It wasn't really until about 2 years ago that I just quietly decided to lean into my intuition and kind of trust myself more, just on the down low. Like, I didn't really advertise it. I just kind of kept like a notebook or a journal just of kind of like patterns I noticed, or like predictions, or what I thought was going on with someone, or blah blah blah. And I still have it to this day. And I've got another one. I filled it out, right? And then I got another one, and I actually got it off Temu, don't come for me. And it's called, it has on the front, because I can't make a label, times that I was right and nobody listened. It just makes me feel really good. And you can put the date down too and just be like. So anyway, I love doing that. I started doing that, right? And I went and looked back at it before. I'm telling you, there was I don't know how many pages, but this is it, right? This is it. You can't look. I wasn't wrong. I wasn't wrong. And I'm not saying like I'm a psychic in terms of the exact prediction, but in terms of there's something going on there. I feel like there's something more to this, or even with predicting people's behavior in terms of that person's coming for me and that person is going to do that, and they're going to form an alliance, and they're going to do that, and they're going to do that every time. But the thing is, with me, I'm really far out. I'm like a year or two out. So it goes back to the whole thing of when people say you're crazy, you're often correct too early. So I just have been quietly keeping this like little journal. And what it has given me is confidence in myself. And I think that's what we've lacked, growing up our whole life, like always knowing we're different, right? Knowing that we can see patterns, but not actually knowing that it's called pattern recognition. Well, at least for me, it wasn't. I don't know. I don't know what the hell was going on with me, but it was just this kind of inner knowing that I could see through people and their BS and call them out, which I've learned is not always the best idea with some people, or just being like, I told you so, and no one listened to me, and feeling like I was the only one that could really see things for what was going on. But I think what I've learned about human nature, the hard way, of course, is that the reason why we've always been kind of made to feel like, oh, you're paranoid, you're overthinking it, you're just looking into it too much, you're just trying to find something wrong, you're just trying to be negative. you're just sensitive and all this kind of stuff. Why people do that often is because you've actually hit the nail on the head. That's what I've learned about people. If anyone tries that stuff with me, well, actually, I'm not around that many people that would, but I've learned that when people throw that back on you, that's really the best defense mechanism from being called out, right? Because another thing I've learned is that even though I know a lot of us can just comfortably speak the truth and sit with the truth, and we actually get very dysregulated if there's deception and manipulation, I know I do. The majority of people, because we are a minority statistically, the majority of people out there do not operate on that, operating schedule. And that's really hard, but it's something that I've come to recognize and come to learn. And so, people saying, oh, they're fine, oh, we're fine. Like, yeah, I'm happy to be here. And like, they really didn't want to be here. And you can just read it all over them, their body, their face, their tone. That is how most people go out and live their life. But we are just confused. And I think that a lot of us have just gone through a life of that where we've been told, no, you're wrong. But we've actually believed it. Because we've been told it so much, right? We've actually believed that. We've abandoned and turned on our kind of internal compass. And I think that's actually what causes a lot of distress. I know it is for me. It's like, well, back in the day, I would ask like third party opinions or like, can you check this? Can you check this? Like, I couldn't trust my own brain. I couldn't trust my own judgment. It's like, well, what do you think? What do you think they meant by that? And what about this? Because it's just, you're so unstable, I guess, in yourself and your judgment. And that's a really horrible way to live. And I know a lot of us have lived or might even still be kind of like trying to shake that off. I mean, I still have moments all the time. And that's a lot to overcome. But I swear that when I started just leaning into my own gut feelings and my instinct, I was never wrong. And I also want to say that things in my life got better 1,000%. 1,000%. I got the right people around me. I've been getting the right experiences come to me. And that is because I've been trusting my judgment on what is a good idea, who is a good idea, who is not a good idea, who to trust, who not to trust. And I think that's where a lot of us have actually run into trouble because we've just trusted too much because we are so of the opinion like, just if someone didn't like me, they would tell me, or if they didn't want to do it, they would do it. But no, they don't do that. And we get taken advantage of because we've just been told, no, your version of reality is not right. And I think that's really sad. And I would just love for more of us to kind of recognize that we do have this in us and we don't need to talk about it in terms of like, I've got so much intuition. I mean, sometimes I do, but it's just a really good, quiet exercise to build your confidence, which then ties back into your self esteem. When you have high confidence and high self esteem because you can trust your own judgment, you actually realize how powerful you can be and that it's actually an advantage. It's actually an advantage to have such high emotional IQ and such good behavior analysis. It actually is such an asset and a bloody weapon when you need it. And I just want that for more of us. I also kind of have a theory, and I mean, this is what this podcast is. This is just from my experience and experiences of others, which I actually think lived experiences are the best way to relate to other people. But that's just me. I have a theory that a lot of us have IBS or stomach or gut issues or inflammatory kind of conditions because we are going against our internal compass. It's like our body is screaming at us that this is not right. There are flags here, even though they're telling you they're not flags and they're telling you a different story. I really believe that our body gets to the point of screaming at us. And that is why a lot of us have stomach issues, because if you think about it, when you have that gut feeling and that, something's not off, it's always there. That's your second brain. That's your nervous system, right? And if you ignore it, well, of course, it's just going to make you sick in many different ways. I mean, that's just my theory, because I feel like when I started not ignoring myself, I have not had the same issues that I used to have in terms of my nervous system, inflammatory kind of stuff, and stomach and gut issues. But that's just me. That's my experience. But it's just, I see it as a bit of a correlation there. I think what did it for me and what really changed my whole outlook on intuition, because it was such a huge life event for me. And it was the one time where I was like, this is too important for me to ignore. And that was when my daughter came back, and she got very sick, and we'd been to Fiji. I did do an episode about that, so I won't get into it too much, but basically unwell. And I do want to say, parents have intuition, mothers do have intuition. A mother with ADHD is like, that's super intuition. Anyway, it was, the drill. It's always viral, right? It's always viral, and common things happen most commonly. Well, I don't know about you, but I get struck by lightning a lot. Yeah, I think we do. We're those people, right? If it's going to happen to someone, it will happen to us. And no one believes that we do get struck by lightning. It's viral. And as the months progressed, and as things started to happen, and I just remember everyone around me telling me that there's nothing wrong, and all the tests are coming back not showing anything significant, and you are putting her through trauma. And I mean, being like attacked like that just alone is really hard, when you feel like everyone is not actually in your shoes seeing what you're seeing, when you've been around your child, right, their whole life. So it was 5 years. You know them inside out. You do, right? You know everything. And people forget that. People will see a snapshot of them for like 2 hours and be like, oh, they're really happy and healthy. And, often we've like been led to just believe other people. But what I've really learned is that no one knows what is right for you, and no one knows what to do in your life except you, because they are not in your body. They've not lived every bloody second of it. And it's really easy just to get a snapshot of something and just kind of give advice, or kind of not see the whole picture, because no one ever will, because no one is with you all the time seeing everything. And that is another reason why I don't actually go to anyone and ask about big things like this. So anyway, I had to make a decision that this was far too significant to just ignore. It wasn't one of those things where it's like, oh, just don't worry, that person's not mad at you, just whatever. It wasn't kind of like a minor thing. This was, in my head, I'm like, this is her health, and I just know that this is not good. I know it. And I didn't know what it was. There were many, many, many options that, developed over the months, because the symptoms kept changing and evolving and all this stuff as it does. And I just knew, even though the medical scientific results were coming back and they weren't like screaming anything, right, that living with you every day, the point that it got to, which was horrific, made me just be like, I'm going to do this on my own, and I don't care what anyone says, and I'm just going to take professionals and friends at the time, and even family at the time, telling me that she's fine. And I mean, I look back and it's like, God, I'm batshit brave and crazy sometimes. Like, I really am. To just go through fighting that system without support, without foundation. I'm a fighter. I'm a fighter. And anyway, I turned out to be right. I didn't know, at the start of it exactly what it was. No one could have, actually, unless they'd run the proper tests that they were meant to run. That's all I'm going to say. But I was right. And that for me was probably the biggest sign of don't ever ignore your intuition ever again, because when you've got a daughter that's facing a diagnosis of like lupus or central neural desensitization syndrome, I think I might have that wrong, but I'm not here to educate on the medical system in terms, but it's basically very similar to the condition that the girl has in Take Care of Maya. In fact, that documentary I watched the last night I was in hospital, and it was like a sign of watching a woman that I could identify with very well, and how badly it turned out if you don't play your cards right, and if you can't, I guess, regulate and manipulate people into getting what you know is the right kind of treatment. And that, if you've seen that, it's really heartbreaking, the ending of that. And anyway, the whole point was, basically not figuring something out, getting to these two options, which to me was either one was really horrific, and then not giving up and using my pattern recognition to then stumble upon bacterial infection or typhoid, and yeah, get her cured of that after 2 courses of antibiotics. And no one came around and was like, oh, we're sorry, we did not actually fucking support you, or you're right. Actually, no one said you were right. No one. And it's not like I wanted a pat on the back, but I just broke myself getting to that answer. Like that was an uphill battle. And I don't know if anyone else that I know could have like actually really pulled that off under the circumstances that I was in, because other things were falling apart at the same time. So anyway, coming out of that experience, that was the biggest turn of events for me, where it was, okay, I'm actually never ever listening to what anyone tells me in terms of something that I would have more personal experience and knowledge in, ever again. That was kind of like, yeah, you lost everyone, but didn't matter, because this is way more important. And I've carried that attitude with me ever since. It doesn't matter if everyone disagrees with me. It's about what I feel and what I kind of sense is off about something, whether it's a person or a decision or an action. I do not go to people and be like, this is it, what should I do? I mean, I will relay stories and be like, oh my gosh, yeah, and this is what I did, and rah rah. But I don't ever pause and stop the car and be like, I can't, and get out and be like, I can't drive. Can you drive? You know, I have done that once in a manual going uphill when I was 15. That was stressful. But I'm just saying, I don't do that anymore. I actually go inward, and I know that I can be independent in making decisions. And I know that for normal people to hear this kind of stuff, it's like, yeah, so what? Well, if you haven't been gaslit by society your whole life, it's kind of hard to imagine how you can just lose your sense of trust and your judgment. But I feel like a lot of us have kind of gone through that, right? And I know that we eventually all come to learn this lesson as well. And I think it's incredible. And I think it's something that should be acknowledged and celebrated more, because when you learn how to weaponize it and that it's one of your biggest assets, I swear to God, like your life can just improve in so many ways. And it's amazing. We bloody do it. I'm just saying. But I do want to say that kind of a blessing and a curse of having this kind of heightened intuition, or just bullshit radar or a bullshit detector, I like to think of it as, is that you really see through people really quickly. And it's actually a bit disappointing. And that is why I actually have quite a small amount of people around me, because they're on the same level of transparency as me. And when you reach that, you actually can't be around anyone that is not living that way. It is just too hard, and it's just not worth it. And what I will say is that you can just spot a liar instantly. And now it has just actually protected me in so many ways, whether it's, friendship or, relationship, or kind of an opportunity in this kind of space, like the podcast and the social media, who to associate with. It has really set me on the right path and prevented me from going down the wrong path like I used to do a lot of the time in my lives, where I would trust people that were the wrong people. And I know that a lot of us have done that. We've made the wrong friends, we've been in the wrong relationships, we've trusted, and we've kind of been coerced into the trust in terms of being confused about our own judgment and being told that you're wrong and your judgment's wrong. So I just want to say that when you realize that you can lean into it, and you have, I have this kind of checklist that I wouldn't even remember, it's not written down, but all these kind of nuances of how I spot deception and manipulation straight away. And I also don't tell people that I know this, because another lesson I learned is that it is actually not worth it sometimes. If you can identify that someone is not going to meet you at your level in terms of accountability, in terms of honesty and transparency, it is not worth your headache. And I have cut people out of my life, and I will wear the villain role, and I will wear that she's just a bitch role. I really will, because I know that it is not worth my time and energy getting into a disagreement, being told that I'm paranoid, them mounting a kind of like a gang. Because what happens is, when when you're right and someone else is wrong, they always have to kind of get a little alliance in place, I find. So if you feel like there's kind of a smear campaign, or there's gossip, or there's people that are going and telling other people their side of the story to kind of get on side, so they'll get them on side, that to me, like, that just stinks guilty conscience. Because if you know that you are right and you're being honest and you've got nothing to hide, you actually don't need to recruit anyone. And I can say that there is absolutely no one that I can think of that I could not walk up to on the street or past and look them dead straight in the eye. And it's happened to me several times lately, where people that I know, from the past life or whatever, can't look me in the eye, and or people have ignored me, and they actually had nothing to do with the conflict. And that to me is, you're bang on, you were correct. Because when you're right, you don't need to convince everyone around you that you're telling the truth. You really don't. You don't need to have a gang. You don't need to have an army. You don't need to have mean behavior if you are being honest and truthful with yourself and with other people. That to me is a big indicator. Another indicator that I always spot is the over explaining. So if someone over explains, I just think in my head, I didn't ask. I didn't ask, mate. So, because that's what people do. They tend to over explain a lie. So if it's an excuse of why someone's cancelled on you, it should be pretty simple. But I'm pretty good at detecting that's a lie. And, sometimes it's mundane, but it's just an indicator that I kind of file away, and I think to myself, okay, that's one lie, and let's just see how many there are to come. Another thing I think of is when people overcompensate and are over friendly. So, very recently I walked in to someone, and they just smelt guilty conscience, and I'd obviously just interrupted something, and they then went out of their way to be over friendly and then talk to me about something that I was interested in, kind of like a special interest topic of mine that they're not interested in. And I thought, why? What have you just been doing? What have you just been lying or talking about? So that's another thing. It's just because we know people's baselines, right? Like, we know when someone is being too nice for no reason. We know when someone is being distant or cold. And that is another indicator that I take on board of, I actually am just being normal and you are just really sucking up to me. And that screams guilty conscience as well. Another thing about spotting liars is that they usually will go into an avoidance state. And you would have heard the saying, when people avoid you, it's because they know deep down they've done you wrong, or sometimes they actually won't even acknowledge that in themselves that they've done you wrong. But again, it's just any time that there is ghosting or blocking or crossing to the other side of the road, not talking anymore, not greeting you, not saying hello, ignoring you, that is an indicator of you're not doing, that you've done something wrong, because I can look at you and walk up to you. And there is actually no better feeling in the world, guys, than walking past someone that did you dirtier than laundry, and you just have your chin up high. You could be alone, they could be in a whole group of people, but if you can just walk straight past them and say hello and meet their eyes, but they cannot look at you, none of them can, and they're all on their phones, that to me is just winning. There is no better feeling than, like, I've got nothing to hide or to be deceptive about. And so again, that is another indicator of spotting a liar. And I swear that it has not set me wrong. So if I could just give kind of any advice for anyone that just is feeling really unsure about whether they can, trust their intuition or sixth sense or whatever you want to kind of label it as. I mean, I'm a person that thinks it's just branding, it's just different branding, whatever you want to call it, Um, I would say that just start keeping a little record and make sure you hide it, no one finds it, and then just refer back to it and be like, tick, tick, tick. And it doesn't have to be, I'm not saying like psychic. Some of us are probably psychic, but I'm not saying I know the exact thing all the time. But I know I'm in the ballpark. I know I'm always in the ballpark. And, even a friend said to me the other day when I was kind of doubting something, she's like, Selena, when have you ever been wrong about someone? When have you ever been wrong about your intuition? And you're like, thanks. I haven't, eh? When you start having the realizations of times in your life where you could see something was off and you were right, it honestly grows your confidence and your self-esteem, and also your trusting your own judgment on things. And I think that when you get to a space of completely and utterly trusting in your judgment on people or jobs or opportunities or anything like that, it actually course corrects your life off the rails, I think. Because I know a lot of us, we have such a history of just making bad choices and trusting the wrong people and being at the mercy of manipulators and toxic people. I any ADHD person I know, early or late diagnosed or undiagnosed, but probably is, it just has this, we all have a track record and we're all like, oh my gosh, no, I've got a really crazy backstory. Every person that I meet online, or just new person, they all say that, or words similar, like, oh no, I've got a real crazy history. It's like, we all do, just in different fonts. But when you can kind of trace back to kind of where it all went wrong, and, I think it's really important, this is how I live, that I just don't blame everyone else for my problem. Like, yeah, there are horrible people that do horrible things, but, why are you always attracting them? Why are you always getting wrapped up with the same kind of person? It's like, well, because I wasn't trusting my bloody gut instinct about people, or I wasn't making the right choices about people, what was best for me, because I wasn't trusting myself, because I felt like I couldn't trust myself. I felt unstable in my compass. But now I feel, honestly, just kind of unstoppable in that way. And I view it as one of my biggest assets. And I just would encourage other people to do the same and lean into it and just do a little trial and error. And then I'm telling you, when you start getting that, I was right, there's no better feeling. I mean, you don't have to be, a dick about it. You can be if you want. But I gave up a long time ago saying, told you so, or I was right. I just don't even bother, because it just happens all the time. And then lastly, another thing I would encourage people to do, or anyone to do, if they were interested, would just be to not be afraid of going against the herd, even if you're the only one that can see something or feels that they can see something or predict that something's going to happen and no one else can. I know what that place is like to be in. It's a really lonely place. I've been in that place a few times about different situations and I get it. But if there's one thing about us is that we have bloody grit and, we do like to have a little bit of oppositional defiance in us. So just lean into that, just use that and just wait for the outcome, because when it does come around, you'll not regret backing yourself, but you will always regret abandoning yourself. I don't know if I saw that on Pinterest, but it sounded like a good quote. Okay, thanks for tuning in. Sorry that this episode was just a bit all over the place, but I'm actually really trying to keep this podcast as authentic to ADHD as I can. And so, I don't want it to be super polished, and I want it to reflect how I really live my life, which is chaos. And sometimes I have good ideas. Sometimes I run out of time. I'm about to be late for something now. But yeah, I just really have been trying to keep this in line with my vision that I always had for it, and that I didn't want to sit here and teach and be on a pedestal and be like, I have my life together and this is what's helped me. It's like, oh no, like I live it and we all live it. And I don't think it's something to master and get rid of and that it's a problem. I think that's just what makes us so bloody interesting and for the plot. So anyway, I will tune in with you guys next time, and hopefully I will have my lighting figured out, because that is what I was fluffing around with this whole time for 2 hours.